Elian West didn't plan to leave the office early that Tuesday until his assistant barged in, breathless, reminding him it was his son's first soccer game. "Your son," she emphasized, "has been asking every day if you're coming." Elian stared at the stack of contracts in front of him, then stood and grabbed his jacket. "Cancel the rest of my meetings." The West name carried weight in every boardroom across Manhattan. Billionaire CEO of West Tech Holdings, Elian was known for being ruthless, efficient, and rarely seen outside a suit. But none of that mattered when it came to his 6-year-old son, Zayn. Especially not when the boy had looked up at him last night and whispered, "You won't forget, right, Dad?" he'd promised. And Elian West never broke promises to his son. The soccer field was already packed when he pulled up in his sleek black Bentley. Parents sat in foldable chairs, chatting about homemade snacks and weekend plans. Elian stepped out of place in his tailored navy suit and Italian leather shoes, scanning the field until he spotted the familiar mop of curly dark hair. Zayn stood in a line of kids, bouncing on the balls of his feet. His face lit up when he saw his father. "You came," Zayn shouted, running over. Elian crouched down, catching him mid-run. "Of course I did, I wouldn't miss it." Zayn pulled back. "Coach said I'm starting today." Elian raised an eyebrow. "Coach, huh? Where is he?" Before Zayn could answer, a sharp whistle cut through the air. "Team B, let's go. Zayn, your left wing." Elian turned toward the voice and stopped cold. The coach was a woman, and not just any woman. She was tall, athletic, wearing a navy windbreaker and black leggings. Her long chestnut hair was tied in a messy ponytail, a whistle hanging around her neck. She barked out another instruction, jogging along the sideline, clipboard in hand like she owned the field. "Coach Carter," Zayn called, running to join the team. Elian blinked. "Coach Carter," she turned then, eyes locking with his. Her gaze was direct, steady, and definitely not impressed by his suit or the fact he'd parked his Bentley on the grass. He gave a polite nod. She didn't return it. Instead, she blew her whistle and turned back to the game like he wasn't even there. Interesting. Elian walked over to the sidelines and stood next to a group of parents. For once, no one recognized him. He liked it that way. He watched Zayn play with the focused attention he usually reserved for mergers. The kid was fast, really fast, but it wasn't just Zayn's footwork that impressed him. It was the way Coach Carter ran the team. She shouted encouragement, corrected form, gave high fives like candy. "Nice assist, Zayn," she called. Elian watched her with growing interest. She didn't talk down to the kids. She challenged them, and the boys adored her. After the game ended, Zayn's team won 3-1. Elian made his way over. Coach Carter was gathering cones when Zayn ran up. "Coach." "That's my dad." She looked up again, brushing a stray hair from her cheek. "Zayn played great," she said, her voice low and confident. Elian stepped forward, offering his hand. "Elian West, Zayn's father." She shook it, her grip firm. "Celine Summers." "Coach, appreciate what you're doing for the team," he said smoothly. "And I appreciate parents showing up," she replied, not missing a beat. "Some kids don't get that." Ouch, he didn't flinch. "I'm here now." She gave a short nod. "Good." Zayn tugged on his dad's sleeve. "Can we go get ice cream?" Elian looked down at his son, then back at the coach. "You like ice cream, Coach?" Celine raised an eyebrow. "I don't date parents." He let out a low laugh. "Didn't ask you out." She tilted her head. "You sure?" "No," he said, eyes locked on hers. "But I might." She cracked the smallest smile, then turned back to the field. "Have a good night, Mr. West." As they walked back to the car, Zayn looked up. "Coach Celine's the best, huh?" Elian glanced over his shoulder, watching her toss balls into the equipment bag. "Yeah," he murmured. "She really is." The next game, he came earlier. The one after that, he brought orange slices for the team. By the fourth game, Celine nodded at him when he arrived. It wasn't much, but it was a start. After practice one Thursday, while Zayn was packing up his cleats, Elian approached her again. "You coach full-time during the season," she said, tossing a ball into her trunk. "I run a small fitness studio off-season." "Why?" He studied her. "You're good with him." Her eyes softened slightly. "Zayn's got heart." "He got that from his mom," Elian said quietly. "She passed when he was 3. Celine's expression shifted. "I'm sorry," he nodded once. "It's been me and him since then." She looked at him for a long minute, something flickering in her eyes, then, "You hungry?" he blinked. "Are you asking me out?" "I'm asking if you and Zayn want to grab pizza. There's a place nearby." Elian smiled. "We'd love that." That night, sitting in a booth with red leather seats and checkered tablecloths, Zayn talked nonstop while Celine listened like every word mattered. Elian watched them both and realized something he hadn't expected. He wanted more of this, not just with his son, with her, and maybe, just maybe, he was starting to fall. The next time Elian saw Celine, it wasn't on the soccer field. It was on a rainy Saturday morning in the cramped lobby of a local community center, where Zayn's team had moved practice due to the weather. Celine was standing near the front desk, clipboard tucked under one arm, hair damp from the rain. She wore a faded windbreaker over a hoodie, leggings tucked into sneakers that had clearly seen better days. She didn't notice him at first, not until Zayn ran ahead and called her name. "Coach Celine?" She turned, smiled at the boy, and then her eyes landed on Elian. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, more guarded, less open than it had been over pizza. "You made it through the flood," she said dryly as he approached. "I thought about sending a boat," Elian replied, brushing rain off his coat sleeve. "But Zayn insisted we brave the storm." "Good instincts," she said. "The gyms in the back follow the squeaky sneakers." As she turned, Elian reached out. "Do you have a minute after practice?" She hesitated. "About what?" "I'd rather not ask it in front of the kids." Celine gave a slow nod. "I'll be at the front desk when we finish." Practice was a blur of echoes and bouncing balls inside the small gym. Elian sat on the bleachers, watching Zayn dart around cones while Celine shouted corrections. She moved constantly, her focus absolute, not once glancing his way. When the hour ended, kids poured out the gym doors with flushed cheeks and tangled hair. Zayn ran ahead, chattering about how he'd nearly scored, while Elian handed him a granola bar and kissed the top of his head. "Can I go with Mateo's mom?" Zayn asked. "They're getting pancakes." Elian glanced at the woman waiting by the exit. "Do you mind keeping an eye on him?" "Of course not," she said with a warm smile. "We'll bring him back around noon." He made sure Zayn had his backpack and then turned, walking toward the front desk where Celine was checking off her attendance sheet. "I'm not going to like what you're about to ask, am I?" she said without looking up. "That depends," Elian said. "On whether you hate money or not." She lifted her gaze, eyes narrowing. "Try again." He leaned against the counter. "I'd like to hire you." Her arms crossed automatically. "For what?" "I want you to coach Zayn privately, twice a week, one-on-one. I'll pay triple whatever you're making here." She stared at him like she was trying to figure out if he was joking. "You want to replace the team?" "No," he said. "This isn't about taking him off it. He loves this, but he's got potential. I want to give him the best shot I can." Celine's voice was flat. "And you think throwing money at it is the way to do that?" "I think giving him access to someone who understands how to challenge him is the way to do it. The money's just a detail." She studied him for a long beat. "You don't get it? Then explain it to me. I'm not a trainer for rich kids who need expensive hobbies. I'm not here to feed egos or polish resumes for prep schools." "That's not what this is, isn't it?" Elian straightened. "You think I'm trying to impress someone. I'm raising a boy who wakes up before dawn to kick a ball against the wall because he wants to be better. He doesn't care about money, neither do I when it comes to this." Celine's jaw tightened. "You're used to getting what you want." "Only when I'm right," he said simply. She looked away, her fingers tapping the edge of the desk. "I don't do private gigs anymore." "Why not?" "Because they complicate things. Parents get possessive, kids get confused, and I don't mix work with anything that gets personal." He met her gaze evenly. "This isn't personal." She tilted her head. "Isn't it?" Before he could answer, a girl walked by with a box of lost and found items. Something fell, an old whistle, and Celine bent to retrieve it. When she straightened, her voice was quieter. "I have boundaries, Elian. Not because I don't care, but because I do, deeply, and I've learned that when you open certain doors, it's hard to close them again." He didn't look away. "Then maybe the right ones shouldn't close." Celine blinked, then exhaled slowly. 2 evenings a week, no more than 90 minutes. "And only if Zayn wants it." Elian nodded. "He will." I drive a rusted-out Civic and live in a studio above a laundromat, she said. That's not changing just because you show up with tailored suits and promises. I'm not trying to change you. Good, she said, grabbing her clipboard. Because I don't bend for men who use money to fix what's broken. I'm not broken. No, she said, walking away. But you are hiding something. Next evening, she showed up at the private indoor field Elian had rented. Zayn was already warming up, but when he saw her, he lit up like a stadium light. You came, she ruffled his hair. Let's see what you've got. Elian stayed back, watching from a distance. Celine didn't hold back, she pushed Zayn harder than any coach he'd seen. She corrected his form, made him run drills twice, then again, then once more without mistakes. When the final whistle blew, Zayn collapsed onto the turf, panting and grinning. I've never been this tired. Celine crouched next to him. That's how you know you're getting better. Elian approached, holding 2 water bottles. He handed one to his son, the other to her. Fair warning, she said, wiping sweat from her brow. I don't go easy on anyone. I wouldn't respect you if you did. She glanced at him. Then maybe you're not as arrogant as I thought. Maybe you're not as untouchable, he said, eyes on hers. She stepped back. Don't test me, West. I'm not, he said, his voice low, but I'm not walking away either. She looked at him for a long moment before turning back to Zayn. Same time Thursday, Elian answered before Zayn could. We'll be here. As they drove home, Zayn dozed in the back seat, cleats still on. Elian glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror, then turned his attention back to the road. He wasn't entirely sure what he'd started with Celine. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't stop now. Celine wasn't on the field when Elian and Zayn arrived Thursday evening. The indoor lights were already humming, casting long reflections across the polished turf, but the usual sharp voice calling out warm-ups was absent. Zayn looked up at him, concerned. She's never late. Elian checked the time. Let's warm up until she gets here. They were halfway through a passing drill when she finally stepped in through the side door, pulling off a rain-damp jacket and tying her hair back in one motion. Her pace was brisk but uneven, her left ankle turning slightly as she walked. She waved Zayn back into formation and bent to adjust the cones. Elian caught the wince she tried to hide. You're hurt, he said quietly when she passed him. I'm fine. You're limping. I twisted it during my own training yesterday. It'll heal. You should rest. She didn't respond, just blew her whistle and barked for Zayn to sprint. Elian watched her closely. Her jaw was tighter than usual and she was more clipped in her movements. Still, she never let it affect her coaching. She crouched to demonstrate footwork, shifted cones between drills, and matched Zayn's pace during sprints, only faltering when she thought no one was looking. After the session ended, Elian handed Zayn a protein bar and water and told him to stretch. Then he walked over to her as she packed up. Come with me, he said. I need to lock up. I'll have someone do it. She narrowed her eyes. Why? Because you can't walk properly and I'm not about to let you drive like that. I've driven with worse. I'm not asking. I didn't realize I worked for you now. You don't, he said, his voice low. But that doesn't mean I'm going to watch you limp away and pretend I didn't see it. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but just to the studio. I left my wrap there and I probably should ice it. He opened the passenger door of his car and waited until she slid in before closing it behind her. The drive was quiet. The rain had returned in sheets, drumming against the windshield. Zayn dozed in the back, exhausted from drills. Celine gave him directions to her studio above a quiet stretch of storefronts in Queens that Elian had never noticed before. The staircase was narrow, unlit, and in need of a fresh coat of paint. He followed her up, keeping a hand near her back in case she stumbled. Inside, the studio smelled faintly of eucalyptus and chalk. Mats lined the floor, a wall of mirrors reflecting the soft overhead lights. In the corner stood a battered mini-fridge and a small metal sink. Sit, he said, nodding to a bench. Foot up. I can handle. You coach my son, not yourself. She rolled her eyes but obeyed, swinging her leg up and removing her shoe. He opened the mini-fridge and found a half-frozen gel pack, then wrapped it in a towel and gently pressed it to her ankle. You shouldn't be teaching on this. I can't afford not to. You shouldn't have to choose between your health and your bills. I've been choosing since I was 16, she said, voice low. It's not new, he looked up at her. Let me help. I don't need fixing. I didn't say you did. But that doesn't mean I can't offer help without strings. Her eyes stayed on his. There are always strings with men like you. Then name them so I can cut them. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. I'm not trying to own you, Celine. I'm trying to understand how someone who trains like a soldier, leads like a general, and gives more than she gets ends up hiding pain because she's afraid no one will care enough to see it. They never have. I do. Silence stretched between them. She looked away first. You ever think maybe I don't want someone seeing all of it? That maybe it's easier to be strong when no one's watching you fall apart? I think it's harder, he said. And lonelier. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled her leg down and stood slowly, testing her weight on the ankle and wincing. You're staying here tonight, Elian said simply, her head snapped toward him. Excuse me, you're hurt. You can't drive. I'll send a car for you in the morning. And Zayn, he's sleeping at my sister's. I called her before we came upstairs. Her mouth opened, then closed. You planned this? I anticipated it. She studied him. And what am I supposed to do here, lie on a mat and meditate while the storm rages outside? No, he said, stepping closer. You're supposed to rest and maybe let someone take care of you for once. She exhaled slowly. Why do you care? Because I see you. And I think I'm in trouble, her brow furrowed. Why? Because I want more than just coaching sessions and polite nods on the field. You barely know me. Then tell me something real. She hesitated. Then, my mother left when I was 8. I was raised by my grandmother who died before I graduated college. I've been on my own ever since. I don't trust easily, I don't fall easily, and I don't believe in fairy tales. Elian took a step closer. I don't either. But that doesn't mean we can't write something real. She met his gaze, eyes guarded but flickering with something else, something unspoken and trembling just beneath the surface. You're dangerous, she whispered, only if you let me be. Another beat passed in silence. Then finally she stepped back. You should go before I change my mind. He glanced toward the door, then back at her. You sure? No, she said, but go anyway. He nodded once, turned, and walked out. As the door clicked softly behind him, Celine leaned against the wall, pressed her fingers to her lips, and closed her eyes. She had no idea what she was doing, but for the first time in years, she didn't want to run. Elian waited exactly 3 days before he walked into Celine's studio again. Not because he was trying to play it cool, he didn't have the patience for games, but because he knew she needed space. And because, if he was honest, he needed to figure out what the hell he was doing. He hadn't planned on falling for her. But it had happened somewhere between watching her tape Zayn's foot after a scrimmage and seeing her chase down a ball like her life depended on it. Somewhere between hearing her laugh during pizza night and watching her limp away from practice, pretending she wasn't in pain. She was unlike anyone he'd ever known, unapologetically strong, consistently honest, and absolutely unwilling to be impressed by anything he owned. He stepped through the studio door without knocking. She was on the mat, balancing on one leg, arms extended like wings. She didn't turn around. You're supposed to call, she said. I thought I'd see if you were still mad. I wasn't mad. You iced me like I was. She held the pose, then lowered her legs slowly. You don't get to bulldoze into my life and then act surprised when I need time to breathe. I'm not surprised, he said. I'm trying not to screw this up. She finally turned. Then stop showing up like you already own the place, he nodded. Fair. She studied him for a moment, then motioned toward the bench. Sit. Elian obeyed, watching as she grabbed a towel and tossed it over her shoulder. You don't know how to slow down, do you? She asked. Not unless someone makes me. Then consider this your warning. I'm not a deal you can close. I'm not a contract you can win. I'm not trying to win you. Her eyes locked on his. Then what are you doing? Trying to find the courage to ask you something that terrifies me. She didn't move. Go on. I've never introduced Zayn to anyone in a permanent way. I've never let anyone this close. You think I haven't noticed? I know you have. That's why I'm asking you now. Come with us this weekend. I rented a place upstate, just the 3 of us, no distractions, no phone calls. And if I say no, then I'll wait until you say yes. She crossed her arms. You're really not afraid of rejection, are you? I'm afraid of losing the only real thing I've had in years." The silence between them thickened. Then she walked over to the window, pulling the curtain aside to let in gray light. "I don't do well with quiet," she said. "Then I guess we'll have to talk the whole way there." She turned her head slightly, a reluctant smile ghosting across her lips. "Fine. But I drive. You can drive my Bentley. I'll drive my own car. That's unacceptable." Tough. They left Friday afternoon, Zayn in the backseat of her Civic with a backpack full of snacks and a soccer ball wedged beneath his feet. Elian followed in his Bentley, trailing behind them like a silent guardian. The drive was long, winding through hills and soaked roads, and by the time they arrived at the cabin nestled in the woods, fog curled around the treetops like smoke. The house was all timber and windows, perched beside a lake that mirrored the sky. Zayn ran through the rooms declaring everything the coolest while Elian and Celine unloaded bags in silence. That night after dinner, they sat on the back deck wrapped in blankets, Zayn asleep upstairs. "I still don't understand why you're doing this," Celine said, watching the lake. "Because when I'm with you, I'm not Elian West, the billionaire. I'm just a man who wants to build something that lasts." She looked down at the mug in her hands. "You know I don't come from anything. I know you built everything you have with your own strength. I don't know how to be taken care of without feeling like I owe something. Then let me take care of you without keeping score." Celine turned toward him slowly. "You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to let me try." The moonlight made her hair glow, and in that moment he saw something shift in her, not surrender, not quite, but a softening, a willingness. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she whispered. "I won't." She leaned in just enough to feel his breath. "Say it then." He didn't hesitate. "I love you." She blinked once, and her voice was barely audible. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She stared at it, frozen. "I didn't buy it yesterday," he said. "I've had it for weeks, waiting for the moment you'd believe I wasn't going anywhere." He flipped the box open. Inside, a simple platinum band with a single diamond sat on navy velvet, understated, elegant, just like her. "I want you in our lives, not as a visitor, not as a coach, as my partner, as Zayn's mother if you'll have us." She didn't speak for a terrifying moment. He thought she wouldn't. Then she reached out and closed the box. "I don't need the ring tonight," she said. He swallowed. But I need you to ask me again when Zayn's awake, when he's watching. Because if I say yes, it's not just to you." Elian nodded, breath catching. "I will." The next morning he asked again. Right there on the front porch, while Zayn sat on the steps eating cereal from a paper bowl, Elian dropped to one knee and looked up at her like she was the only thing that had ever mattered. Zayn's eyes widened. "Are you proposing?" Elian nodded. "Only if she says yes." Celine looked down at both of them, the boy who had given her purpose and the man who had undone every wall she'd built, and she finally let the last of her defenses fall. "Yes." Zayn dropped his spoon. "Does this mean I get to call you Mom?" Celine pressed a hand to her mouth, tears threatening. "If you want to." Zayn grinned. "I've wanted to for a while." Elian stood and pulled them both into his arms. Later that year, they married in a quiet ceremony on the same field where they'd first met. Zayn walked her down the aisle holding her hand with proud, steady steps. Elian waited, eyes locked on hers. There were no grand speeches, just a promise spoken quietly but with certainty to love, to protect, to build something real. And as they walked off the field together, husband, wife, and son, Celine whispered the words she'd been afraid to say for too long. "I never believed in fairy tales, but I believe in you." Elian tightened his grip on her hand. "Then that's all we need." The wedding had been quiet, but the life that followed it was anything but. Celine stood in the center of the polished hardwood floor, barefoot, in a sun-drenched penthouse that overlooked the city from 60 stories up. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the skyline stretched out around her like a dream she'd never dared to have. It was mid-morning, and the air smelled of espresso and the faint citrus of her favorite candle, the one Elian had found during their weekend in Amalfi, and had shipped by the case when she'd mentioned how much she liked it. Zayn forgot his science project, she said as Elian stepped out of the master bedroom, tie undone and shirt sleeves rolled. I already sent it to the school, he replied, slipping on his watch. Driver dropped it off 20 minutes ago. She turned to face him. You're terrifyingly efficient. He crossed the room and kissed her forehead. I like solving problems before you notice them. You say that like it's romantic. It is, he murmured. You just haven't been spoiled enough to recognize it yet. She rolled her eyes but leaned into him. You're impossible. And you're late, he said, glancing at the clock. Aren't you supposed to be at the studio in 20 minutes? I canceled my classes this morning. I'm meeting with the architect at 11. He raised an eyebrow, interest sparking. You picked one, Julian Tang. He's done a lot of public community spaces. He gets what I want. And you're sure about the location, she nodded. It's central, walkable for the kids, and there's room for both a turf field and a training gym. He rested his hands on her waist. You know you don't have to build this alone anymore, right? I'm not, she said softly. But I want to build it my way. I've never had the chance to do that before. Then I'll stay out of your way, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But when you're ready for investors. You'll be at the top of my list, she finished, smiling. Just behind a few thousand grant applicants and one very persistent city councilwoman, he laughed, the sound low and warm. I'm patient. You're a billionaire. You're used to skipping lines. I'm married to a woman who makes me stand in them. She kissed him then, slow and deep, before breaking away with a sigh. I really do have to go. Driver's already downstairs. Of course he is. As she grabbed her bag and headed for the elevator, he called after her, dinner at 7, don't be late, it's a surprise. She didn't ask what kind, she didn't need to. With Elian, surprises were always extravagant, but lately, they'd also been personal. She arrived at the restaurant promptly, stepping out of the car in a tailored navy dress he'd sent that afternoon without a note, just her size and a delicate silver clasp at the back. The maitre d' greeted her by name and led her to a rooftop terrace strung with golden lights. Elian stood at the far side, framed by the skyline, a soft breeze tugging at his sleeves. There was only one table, set for 3, with a small bouquet of bluebells in the center. She walked over slowly. You booked the whole rooftop, he nodded. Zayn's with my sister tonight. I thought we could start celebrating early. She glanced at the third-place setting. We're expecting someone, he handed her a folded envelope. Open it. Inside was a letter handwritten, the ink slightly smudged near the bottom. Celine, we've done a lot in the past year. Built a home, started a life, found a rhythm that feels like us, but there's one thing I haven't given you yet. One thing I've been waiting to ask until I really knew you'd believe it was real. I want forever, not just legally, not just in name, I want it in every way. Look under your plate. She lifted the porcelain charger and found a second box, not velvet this time, but wood, polished and carved with her initials. Inside was a key. The house, Elian said softly, stepping behind her. The one on the lake, it's ours now. I want it to be where we spend the summers. Where Zayn learns to swim without floaties, where we fight about paint colors and burn pancakes. She turned slowly. You bought it, I bought it, he said, because you smiled there in a way I've never seen anywhere else. She pressed the key to her lips, eyes shining. You're really doing this. This and more, he said. I want to grow old with you. I want to wake up to your voice and go to sleep with your hand in mine. I want to build your center, raise our son, and never spend another day wondering if I could have loved you better. You already do, she whispered. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing the corners of her mouth. Then say it again. I love you. He kissed her slow and certain, and when they pulled apart, the city lights flickered behind them like stars. Months passed. The center broke ground in spring, with Celine at the helm and Elian quietly funding the pieces she couldn't secure. She insisted on keeping his name off the donor wall, and he agreed, though he made sure a bench with her name was placed at midfield. Zayn started playing in a travel league, and Celine coached half the team while juggling board meetings and grant deadlines. Elian attended every game, sometimes in suits, sometimes in hoodies, whatever earned fewer stares from the other parents. They fought sometimes. About bedtimes, about scheduling, about the best way to build something that didn't yet exist. But they always ended in the same place, tangled in each other's arms, breathless and laughing, with apologies whispered into kisses. They didn't host lavish galas or throw extravagant parties. Their life was simpler than most expected, filled with early mornings, loud dinners, and quiet nights on the couch watching Zayn fall asleep between them. One evening, as summer faded into fall, they returned to the lake house. The air was crisp and the trees had just begun to turn. Celine stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching Zayn skip stones across the water. Elian joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. "I try not to," she said. "It still feels impossible." "It's not." "I know," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "That's what makes it beautiful." Inside, Zayn called for them. Dinner was ready, his version of grilled cheese and tomato soup, proudly over-seasoned and slightly burnt. They walked in together, fingers still linked, and for once there was nothing left to chase. Nothing left to prove, just love, real and rooted, and finally forever.